Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into something pretty fascinating today. A real detective story, full of mystery and innovation. We're going to explore the history of cryptocurrency.
It really is amazing to think about, the idea of digital money, money that's just out there on computers, has been around longer than most people realize.
So before we jump into the Bitcoin craze, let's rewind a bit. What came before? What were some of those early attempts at making digital cash happen?
Well, way back in the 1980s, before most of us were even using the internet, really, there was this brilliant guy named David Chaum who came up with something called Digicash.
Digicash, huh? Sounds pretty futuristic for the 80s. What was the big idea behind it?
Well, Chaum basically wanted to create a way for people to pay electronically, but completely privately. No one, not even the government, would be able to track what you were buying or selling. He used cryptography, which is kind of like a way of scrambling information so that only the people with the right key can read it.
That's pretty clever. Did Digicash become like the PayPal of the 80s then?
It was a groundbreaking idea, that's for sure, but it didn't really catch on. You have to remember, not everyone had computers back then, and the internet was still pretty new. But Digicash, well, it paved the way for other innovators to try their hand at creating digital money.
So it was like a stepping stone then, kind of an important first attempt that helped others build on the idea.
Exactly. There were a few other attempts, like B-Money and Big Gold that came along in the late 90s, early 2000s. Just ideas shared online proposing these new ways to create digital currencies, but they never really took off.
It seems like all the ingredients were there, but maybe the timing just wasn't quite right. What changed in the mid-2000s that made the world ready for Bitcoin, you think?
Well, one big thing was that the internet had become much more widespread. Lots more people were online, and they were doing more than just emails and browsing websites, They were shopping, banking, even investing online.
So there was a need for secure and efficient ways to handle money online, right?
Exactly. And then, 2008, right in the middle of a global financial crisis, you have this mysterious figure, well, maybe it was a group of people, but they used the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto and published this white paper outlining a totally revolutionary idea, Bitcoin.
And here's where the real mystery kicks in. No one actually knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is to this day, right?
It's true. It's one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in the tech world, All we have to go on is Nakamoto's writings and the Bitcoin code itself.
It's almost like a superhero origin story. So what was so revolutionary about Bitcoin? What set it apart?
Well, Bitcoin was designed to be completely decentralized, a digital currency, but decentralized. This means no government, no bank, no company would control it. All transactions would be recorded on a public ledger. It's called a blockchain, which is basically, it's like a digital record of every Bitcoin transaction that's ever been made.
So it's like creating a whole new financial system outside of the control of the traditional players. I can imagine that got a lot of attention, especially after the financial crisis of 2008.
Oh, absolutely. People were definitely looking for alternatives. And Bitcoin, well, it seemed to offer a way to break free from that existing financial system.
So 2008, we have the Bitcoin white paper. When did things actually start happening, like on the ground?
In January 2009, Nakamoto mined the very first block of the Bitcoin blockchain. It's called the Genesis block, and it's like the foundation stone of that entire network.
Now, I've read that there was a hidden message embedded in that Genesis block, wasn't there? What was that all about?
Oh yeah, that was a pretty clever touch. Nakamoto actually included a headline from The Times, the newspaper, and it was about bank bailouts. It was kind of a subtle nod to the fact that, Bitcoin was created as this alternative to the very institutions that were at the heart of the financial crisis.
So like a coded message to the world, a sign of things to come. Who were some of the first people to jump on board the Bitcoin train?
Well, one of the earliest adopters was Hal Finney, brilliant programmer, well-respected in the cryptography community. He actually received the first ever Bitcoin transaction directly from Nakamoto himself, a transfer of 10 Bitcoins.
Wow, just imagine 10 Bitcoins back then. That must be worth a fortune today. Talk about an early adopter's dream.
And then there's this other story about an early miner, a guy named James Howells, who managed to mine thousands of Bitcoins back when it was still relatively easy to do.
Thousands? Oh man, that must be worth a fortune now.
Well, there's a catch. Howells accidentally threw away the hard drive where his Bitcoins were stored. It's estimated to be worth, well, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars today. He's even offered to give the local council a share of the fortune if they'll let him dig up the landfill where he thinks the hard drive ended up.
Oh wow. That has got to be one of the biggest oops moments in tech history. It sounds like those early days of Bitcoin were a wild mix of excitement and uncertainty. Weren't there some serious technical challenges as well?
Yeah, you're right. In 2010, there was this major vulnerability that was discovered in the Bitcoin code. It allowed someone to create way more Bitcoins than should have been possible. It was a real shock to the system.
A bug in the code. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. How did they fix it?
Luckily, the Bitcoin developers acted super quickly. They patched the vulnerability and they implemented this thing called a hard fork to essentially rewrite the blockchain and remove that problematic transaction.
Wait, a hard fork? What does that even mean? It sounds pretty intense.
It's basically like creating a split in the road. Imagine you're driving along and suddenly the road splits into two separate paths. A hard fork does the same thing to the blockchain. It creates these two separate versions of the Bitcoin network, and in this case, that fork removed the fraudulent transaction from the official record.
That's a pretty dramatic solution.
Yeah.
It shows how adaptable the Bitcoin network is, though, and resilient. So despite this early hiccup, Bitcoin managed to survive. And it even gained some mainstream attention, didn't it?
Oh yeah, by 2011, Bitcoin was starting to show up in popular culture. You had episodes about Bitcoin on TV shows, articles in magazines, even a mention in the New Yorker, I think.
Right.
Organizations like WikiLeaks even started accepting Bitcoin donations when traditional payment methods got shut down.
It's like Bitcoin stepped out of the internet shadows and into the spotlight.
Exactly. It was becoming more than just a curiosity for tech folks. It was starting to be seen as a real alternative to the traditional financial system.
And then in 2013, Bitcoin went through its first major price bubble, right?
Yeah, the price just skyrocketed. I mean, it reached over $1,000 for the first time. It was a total frenzy. Everyone's talking about Bitcoin, but like most bubbles, it didn't last. The price crashed pretty soon after.
It must have been a wild ride for those early investors, the ups and downs, I mean. Didn't the skepticism surrounding Bitcoin grow even stronger after that Mount Gox hack?
Absolutely. Mount Gox was like one of the biggest Bitcoin exchanges back then. And in 2014, it came out that they'd been hacked. Millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin just vanished. It was a huge blow to Bitcoin's reputation and raised serious questions about, its security.
It seems like every time a new technology emerges, you always get those who try to exploit it for their own gain. But Bitcoin survived this. And what's even more surprising is that it inspired a whole wave of new digital currencies, the altcoins. Can you tell us a bit about Litecoin, that one that's often called the silver to Bitcoin's gold?
Litecoin was created in 2011 by Charlie Lee, a former Google engineer. It was designed to be faster, kind of a more lightweight version of Bitcoin with some technical differences in how transactions are processed. It got pretty popular pretty fast as an alternative to Bitcoin.
So it's like Bitcoin was the pioneer, blazing the trail, and then Litecoin followed in its footsteps, offering a slightly different take on that whole digital currency idea. It must have felt like the Wild West out there with all these new cryptocurrencies popping up.
Yeah, it definitely was. It was a time of just crazy experimentation and innovation. But amidst all that hype, this truly groundbreaking project was emerging, Ethereum. And it wasn't just another cryptocurrency, was it? It was this whole platform with the potential to really change everything.
That's right. Ethereum, launched in 2015 by this young programmer, Vitalik Buterin, took the whole concept of blockchain and went beyond just digital currency. It introduced something called smart contracts. They're basically like self-executing agreements, but written in code.
Okay, I've heard of smart contracts, of course. But if I'm being honest, I never quite wrapped my head around what they were all about. Can you break it down for us, like in simple terms? Sure, okay, so imagine you and a friend want to bet on, I don't know, a football game. You could write up a contract on a piece of paper, but then you'd have to rely on each other to actually honor the agreement, right? With a smart contract, you could code all the terms of the bet directly into the blockchain. So when the game is over, the smart contract automatically checks the score and transfers the winnings to the winner's account. Just like that.
Oh, I see. So it's like having this digital referee that makes sure everybody plays by the rules. No more arguing about who won.
Exactly. And smart contracts can be used for all sorts of things, not just bets, like buying and selling goods and services, automating all these complex financial transactions. It really cuts out the need for all those intermediaries like lawyers, banks, escrow services, and that can save tons of time and money.
That's pretty incredible. It's like having a whole legal system, but built into the blockchain. No wonder people got so excited about Ethereum.
Yeah, it was a real game changer. Ethereum also let developers create their own tokens, which are basically like digital assets that can represent anything, really. virtual goods in a video game, shares in a company, you name it. This led to, well, an explosion of new projects and a whole wave of fundraising through initial coin offerings, the ICOs.
Ah, ICOs.
Mm-hmm.
Those were everywhere for a while there. Seemed like every day there was a new cryptocurrency launching. Didn't they also attract a lot of scams and bad actors, though?
Yeah, you're right. The ICO boom was a bit like the Wild West. You had some genuinely innovative projects, but there were also a lot that were just poorly planned and, yeah, some were outright scams. It was exciting, but risky.
So even with all this amazing potential, Ethereum wasn't totally immune to challenges.
Right.
There was that big hacking incident that really shook the Ethereum community.
Yeah, in 2016, the DAO, which stood for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, was hacked. The DAO was this complex smart contract that had raised millions of dollars from investors. And these hackers found a vulnerability in the code, and basically, they drained a big chunk of the DAO's funds.
That's got to be like every investor's worst nightmare. How did the Ethereum community respond to something like that? I mean, such a massive hack.
What was a defining moment for Ethereum, that's for sure. The community had this really tough decision. Should they intervene and rewrite the blockchain to basically undo the hack, or should they stick to this principle of immutability, which means the blockchain is unchangeable, right?
It sounds like a huge ethical dilemma. What happened in the end?
They ultimately went with a hard fork, which created those two separate versions of Ethereum, remember? The majority of the community moved over to the new chain, Ethereum ETH, which reversed the hack, but a smaller group stayed on that original chain, Ethereum Classic, ETC, which kept that whole principle of immutability intact.
So even in the decentralized world of crypto, there are still times when you just have to make these tough decisions. It's a reminder that technology, it's ultimately shaped by human choices.
Absolutely. And the debate about immutability, how to handle hacks, all of that, it continues today. It's a really fascinating question, philosophically,
So while all of this was happening with Ethereum, Bitcoin was still evolving too, right? Wasn't there another hard fork in Bitcoin's journey around this time?
Yeah, you're right. In 2017, Bitcoin went through its own hard fork, and it led to the creation of Bitcoin Cash, BCH. This one was about disagreements on how to scale the Bitcoin network, to handle more transactions. Some developers wanted to increase the block size to allow for more transactions per block, but others liked this different approach called segregated witness, SegWit, which was all about improving efficiency without changing that block size.
So another clash of visions for the future of Bitcoin. How did that one play out?
Well, SegWit was eventually implemented on the main Bitcoin chain, but Bitcoin Cash, with its larger block size, it's still around as a separate cryptocurrency. It shows you how, with cryptocurrency being decentralized, you can end up with multiple solutions coexisting.
Like having different flavors of ice cream, right? Each one appeals to different people. So as Bitcoin and Ethereum matured and they gained more users, they also started to get the attention of regulators. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. Governments all over the world were suddenly trying to figure out how to regulate this new and rapidly evolving technology. You had organizations like the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN in the US, and the Bank of England. They all started issuing guidance on how cryptocurrencies should be handled under existing financial regulations.
I remember seeing all these headlines about governments trying to figure out how to stop money laundering and other illegal activities using cryptocurrencies. It was clear that it was becoming a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, for sure. And the regulatory landscape is still changing, still evolving. There are all these ongoing debates about how to best balance innovation with protecting consumers. But along with the regulatory scrutiny, we also saw growing mainstream adoption, right? Companies like Microsoft started accepting Bitcoin. Overstock.com embraced it as a payment option.
It felt like crypto was slowly but surely becoming more part of our everyday lives.
That's it. You see, those early days of cryptocurrency were really driven by tech enthusiasts and those early adopters, but now in the last decade, there's been this huge shift toward broader acceptance. Cryptocurrency isn't this niche thing anymore. It's increasingly a part of the global financial system.
And Bitcoin, being the first and most well-known, it just kept pushing those boundaries. Didn't we even see Bitcoin futures contracts launched on traditional financial exchanges?
Yeah. That's big. Back in 2017, major platforms like the CME Group and CBOE, they launched Bitcoin futures trading. It meant investors could speculate on the future price of Bitcoin without actually owning it. That was a huge step toward mainstream acceptance, right there in the traditional financial markets.
It's like Bitcoin went from being this rebellious outsider to, getting invited to the Wall Street party.
Exactly. It was a sign that Bitcoin was becoming a real, recognized asset class. But even with all this mainstream acceptance, there was also that increasing scrutiny over its environmental impact, right? All that energy consumption needed for Bitcoin mining, the way new Bitcoins are created and transactions are verified, it became this hot topic.
That was especially highlighted when Tesla, the electric car company, they first decided to accept Bitcoin payments, and then they suspended them, all because of these worries about the environmental impact.
Right, you got it. That Tesla announcement in 2021, that really put Bitcoin's energy use front and center. It sparked this much bigger conversation about, the sustainability of cryptocurrencies and the search for better, more energy-efficient ways to do things.
It seems like cryptocurrency has this constant push and pull, right?
Right.
Between innovation, adoption, and then dealing with the new challenges that come up with this rapidly changing technology.
That's a really good point. The history of cryptocurrency, it's not a straight line at all. It's full of these twists and turns, successes and setbacks. But one thing is crystal clear. Cryptocurrency has completely changed how we think about money, about technology, and about the future of finance.
And speaking of the future, where do we go from here? What's the next chapter, do you think, for this exciting world of cryptocurrency?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's so much going on right now, it's hard to keep up. One thing that's really exploding right now is decentralized finance. DeFi, they call it.
DeFi. I like the sound of that. Tell us more.
DeFi is all about creating financial systems that are, open, transparent, and accessible to anyone, anywhere with an internet connection. It's about getting rid of those middlemen, the banks, the brokers, the big institutions, and letting people have more control over their own money.
So instead of going to a bank to get a loan, you could borrow money directly from other people using some kind of decentralized platform.
Exactly. And instead of your savings sitting in a bank account, you could lend it out to other people and earn interest, all through these smart contracts on a blockchain.
Now that is revolutionary. It really is giving power back to the people. Are there other trends out there that you find particularly exciting?
I think one of the most promising trends is how blockchain technology is being used to solve real-world problems, but beyond just finance. We're seeing it used to create more secure and transparent supply chains, to verify the authenticity of, digital artwork, collectibles, even to improve voting systems.
It's amazing how a technology that started out being all about digital currency is now branching out into all these different parts of our lives.
I know, right? It's early days yet, but the potential is just enormous. I think we're only just beginning to see what blockchain can do.
It's incredible to think that we've covered so much ground already, from the early days of Digicash to the rise of DeFi. As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what would you say are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the world of cryptocurrency is constantly in motion. What seemed impossible a few years ago is reality now. We're seeing a complete change in how we think about money, technology, the whole future of finance.
It's definitely an area that rewards curiosity, and a willingness to learn and adapt. It really has been a wild ride, hasn't it? I mean, from those mysterious beginnings of Bitcoin to the rise of DeFi, the world of cryptocurrency just keeps on surprising us.
And it doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon. As we head into the future, I think we're going to see even more innovation and disruption across all sorts of industries.
We've talked about some of the potential benefits of blockchain, but what about the flip side? What are some of those hurdles that crypto needs to overcome to really reach its full potential?
That's a good question. One of the big ones, as I mentioned before, is scalability. Some blockchain networks, Bitcoin being a prime example, they can be pretty slow and expensive to use, especially if you compare them to those traditional payment systems. If we want to see crypto go truly mainstream, well, it needs to be able to handle way more transactions and quickly and efficiently too.
So it's kind of like a highway that gets totally jammed during rush hour. We need to find a way to widen those lanes, expand the capacity of these blockchain networks. That way they can handle more traffic.
Exactly. And there are a lot of brilliant minds working on this problem. They're exploring all sorts of solutions, like those layer 2 scaling solutions, which basically create a second layer on top of the blockchain to handle transactions more efficiently.
Right. And then there's that whole environmental impact issue we discussed earlier. Any promising developments on that front?
For sure. Now that there's more awareness about the energy consumption of certain cryptocurrencies, there's been a real push to find more sustainable solutions. One of the most promising is the shift towards those proof-of-stake consensus mechanisms.
Now, you mentioned proof of stake before, but for our listeners who might not remember, How is it different from that proof of work, the system that Bitcoin uses?
Okay, so with proof of work, like we see with Bitcoin, miners are using all these powerful computers and they're solving these really complex math problems to basically validate transactions and add those new blocks to the blockchain. But that process, it uses a ton of energy. With proof of stake, it's different. Instead of all those miners competing to solve problems, you have validators who are chosen based on how much cryptocurrency they hold. And they're willing to stake it or kind of lock it up as collateral. This gets rid of that need for energy-intensive mining, and it makes the network way more environmentally friendly.
So it's like going from a system that's all about brute force to one that rewards people who have a genuine interest in the network's success. Right. That sounds like a step in the right direction.
Oh, it is. It is. And in fact, Ethereum, the second largest cryptocurrency, they're actually in the process of moving from proof of work to proof of stake right now, which should dramatically reduce their energy consumption.
That's great to hear. It seems like there's a real effort to make cryptocurrency more sustainable, which is encouraging.
Another challenge that's worth talking about is regulation. As cryptocurrency becomes more and more mainstream, governments all over the world are still grappling with how to regulate it. This can lead to a lot of uncertainty for businesses and investors, and it can even stifle innovation if the regulations are too strict.
It's a tough one, right? It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Those existing financial regulations, they just weren't designed with crypto in mind. So finding that balance between supporting innovation but also protecting consumers, it's not easy.
You got it. And then there's the whole issue of security. Cryptocurrency exchanges, those are the places where people buy, sell, and trade crypto. They're still prime targets for hackers. We've seen tons of high-profile hacks over the years, and they've resulted in millions of dollars worth of crypto just disappearing.
It just goes to show that even though blockchain technology itself is really secure, the systems built around it, they can still be vulnerable.
Absolutely. It just underlines how important it is to use reputable exchanges, have strong passwords, and, turn on that two-factor authentication to protect your crypto.
So with all of these challenges on the table, you still seem pretty optimistic about the future of crypto.
Oh, I am. I genuinely believe that cryptocurrency has the potential to change so many aspects of our lives. How we manage our money, how we interact with the world around us, it can all be different. But we need to remember that it's still early days, It's a young technology and it's evolving. There will be bumps along the way for sure, but the innovation, the potential, it's just too big to ignore.
It really has been an amazing journey, exploring the history and the future of cryptocurrency. As we wrap up our deep dive, what advice would you give to our listeners who are, curious and want to learn more about this exciting world?
The best advice I can give is to stay curious, stay informed, and don't be afraid to just dive in and experiment a bit. There are tons of resources out there, educational websites, online communities, all sorts of places where you can connect with other crypto enthusiasts.
And remember, everybody, do your research before you invest in any cryptocurrency. It's a volatile market, and there are definitely risks involved.
That's great advice. It's crucial to approach cryptocurrency with a level head, to recognize both its potential and its limitations.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the fascinating world of cryptocurrency. It's been an absolute pleasure learning from you today.
The pleasure was all mine, really. I've enjoyed sharing my insights with you and our listeners.
And to all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration of cryptocurrency, its history, and its potential to shape the future. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember, the future is out there, waiting to be written.